the Commission remains committed to protecting its information, staff and networks from illicit intelligence sharing actions.
Today in the EU, how a spy scandal exposed the EU's failure to protect its officials. The EU has virtually no protocol in place to defend its civil servants from foreign spying. Yesterday, the European Parliament debated on how to change that after an explosive investigation was published in December. According to it, Hungarian secret forces spied on the European Anti-Fraud Office between 2015 and 2017, as the unit was investigating into Orbán's son-in-law for corruption. How could the espionage go unnoticed? And what are the risks of the EU's lack of counterintelligence measures? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. First up, I'll speak with Szabolcs Panyi, the Hungarian journalist whose investigation broke the story wide open. Szabolcs, you led the investigation conducted by Hungarian Direct 36 and the Belgian newspaper The Tide. You revealed that Hungary's secret services had been spying on EU officials since 2015. First of all, how did you get started on the investigation?
Well, I already heard it many years ago that such espionage has been going on. But I could not collect for a long time the precise details. Who was surveilling, who were the targets, what was the reason. And it's a very complicated story because we have a powerful minister in the government who was overseeing the foreign intelligence.
Right.
And who was giving political tasks. And this was one of those tasks that the Hungarian foreign intelligence basically developed a whole department aimed at spying against EU institutions, and this happened in the mid-2010s.
And did you have sources that revealed that to you?
It was confidential sources, both politicians and also those sources who are familiar with the Hungarian national security community. Obviously, this is a very sensitive issue, and this is exactly the investigation where you cannot really find any document because everything is classified.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how did you go about finding that information?
Well, first, when I heard about this specific case that the EU's anti-fraud investigators from Olaf were surveilled, those people who were on multiple missions in Hungary to investigate EU fraud connected to Viktor Orbán's son-in-law. Mm-hmm. Of course, that was already a very specific information, and that gave me some ideas who may know about it. People in the European Commission, people working in Brussels on national security, also people who know what the Hungarian foreign intelligence was doing in that specific time frame. So I was figuring out who are those people who have inside knowledge. And fortunately, I did manage to confirm this espionage case from all sides. So I talked to people who heard about it from Brussels, from the European Commission side. And I also managed to talk to people who heard about it from the surveillance side, those who conducted the surveillance or who were briefed about the surveillance.
You've been also spied on in the past, yes, as it was uncovered during another big investigation related to the Pegasus spyware. How did it feel to work on this and get yourself exposed to espionage again?
There's always, of course, a risk that I myself may be under surveillance. We just have to live with that. This is how Hungary operates these days. Journalists are getting surveilled by the government. So that's like the new modus operandi of our state apparatus. We just have to get used to it. Unfortunately, the European Union does not really do anything about it. Of course, the European Parliament has conducted an investigation through the PEGA Inquiry Committee, but the European Commission failed to act ever since.
And so what can you tell us about Hungarian Secret Services practices based on your reporting?
Yeah, so this is Hungary. This is a small country. Obviously, our intelligence services are also not the best or most professional. And there was this funny case when these Olaf investigators in Hungary were followed and surveilled by the Hungarians. But it was such an amateurish operation that those who were surveilled, they noticed that they are being followed, and they made moves that made it obvious for those who were surveilling them that they got exposed. And this information actually got back to other officers working for the Hungarian Foreign Intelligence who were not involved in this operation. And they learned about the operation because of the failure, because they heard rumors that their colleagues got exposed. So this tells you that this is not always the best people who are carrying out these surveillances, but it's also a very regular method that phones are tapped, sometimes emails are checked. There's been instances when hotel rooms of foreign delegations are broken into, and secretly the laptops, if they're left in the hotel rooms, they're getting hacked and copied. So basically, these are the very usual methods. And also what we know about the Hungarian Foreign Intelligence is that they mostly try to get information through Hungarian citizens working in the commission or working in Brussels, either through trying to recruit them as informants or through their surveillance. Because when they're surveilling a Hungarian citizen, of course, it's like from a legal perspective, it's more feasible for
Yes, of
them.
Course.
And in this Olaf case, those Olaf investigators who were probing Viktor Orbán's son-in-law, they were mostly actually Hungarian citizens. They traveled to Hungary. They conducted their inquiry and meetings in Hungary. So that gave a lot of opportunity for the Hungarian Foreign Intelligence to go after them.
And what you say is particularly concerning because it seems that EU institutions do not have any protocol for the protection of their civil servants.
Look, the problem here is that the whole European Union was not ready for this challenge posed by Hungary, formerly by Poland, these days by Slovakia. They never thought that suddenly hostile actors or Trojan horses may emerge within the institutional system. And at the same time, all these EU institutions, when they employ, for example, Hungarian citizens, when they do their background checks, they still rely on the Hungarian national security agencies. So basically, they are flagging to the Hungarian national security agencies who are those Hungarian citizens in Brussels who will have access to more sensitive information, basically putting a target on them. So there's lots of layers of this. And at the same time, we also have Hungarian intelligence officers working with EU institutions as so-called national experts, for example. They are inside the system when at the same time, at least their colleagues are spying against those same institutions. So it's really absurd.
So what about Hungary? Has the story opened a larger public conversation on the government's conduct?
Yeah, it's been quite an explosive story. Even Prime Minister Viktor Orbán had to reply to it. Basically, the government did not deny anything. That was the most funny thing. The only thing they denied is that these surveillances were illegal. Basically, their reaction was that everything that happened was legal. It was according to the law.
Oh, wow.
They did not say it did not happen. They said it was illegal. I mean, I'm quite proud because this investigation won for us the annual award for Best Hungarian Investigative Journalism, which is always a nice prize to get.
Congrats on that.
Thank you. And at the same time, there were some proceedings, legal proceedings. An opposition MP, for example, filed a complaint with the prosecutor's office, who just closed the case yesterday, saying that, well, this happened in 2018, so the crimes has expired. And also, it was one of the justifications. Well, Olaf or those Olaf officers who were surveilled, they did not press charges, so probably they were okay with it. It's extremely absurd.
And so, final question here. As a journalist myself, I'm aware that there usually is a divide between what the media exposes, writes on, and how politics then reacts. But if you did have, a platform to recommend to the EU institutions how to move forward and how to prevent this from happening again, what would be your piece of advice?
I think the European Commission made a very bad decision when they launched the so-called rule of law conditionality mechanism against Hungary, not because of the mechanism, but, for example, because illegal surveillance of journalists or media freedom issues broadly were not part of it at all, which is quite infuriating to me because that's one of the biggest problems that we're facing actually in Hungary. These unchecked surveillances, which we see now also target EU institutions, and also the crackdown on free media. The European Commission should have dealt with these issues. At the same time, I understand that national security is always up to the sovereign nation states that make up the European Union, but having a more robust counterintelligence operation in Brussels would work. I know that the Belgians are doing the best what they can do. They have this extra baggage, extra task that they are not only doing counterintelligence on behalf of Belgium, but also they have to deal with all the institutions to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But the EU should really step up when it comes to its own security. And really, Hungary is just a minor player in Brussels when it comes to espionage. There's Russia, there's China, there's Iran. There are Middle Eastern countries who are posing more serious risks and who have a much bigger apparatus, and they are also much better at spying. But at the same time, the EU should pay more attention to these internal maverick governments like Viktor Orbán's, because if it gets undeterred, this will embolden other countries in the European Union with a similar like-minded leaders such as Robert Fico in Slovakia. If Hungary can get away with spying against the EU, why should Slovakia not do it, for example?
That's a good question indeed. Thank you, Szabolcs.
Thank you for having me.
Next, to understand better how EU institutions are dealing with the issue that the Hungarian spy scandal uncovered, I'm joined in the studio by Daniel Freund, an MEP with the Greens. Hi, Daniel, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
So you've made corruption one of your major battles in Parliament. Is the Hungarian espionage story first? And why is it different from other foreign interference scandals?
I haven't heard to a similar degree of a national government spying on the EU institutions. Also, domestically, they spy on opposition politicians, on investigative journalists, on civil society, and so on. On occasion, we have heard it in other countries as well, but the extent to which Orbán has, in a way, weaponized his intelligence services against anyone that disagrees with him is, I think, unprecedented, and particularly because it's a country inside the European Union. He sits at the negotiation table, so this is very different than China, Russia, or others interfering in our politics.
Indeed, it is the first time that a member of the European Union is responsible for espionage of Brussels. So how can the EU respond to the Hungarian incident? Has a procedure been triggered? I mean, we're talking about a country which still held the presidency of the Council a month ago.
I'm not aware that the Commission has initiated any kind of procedure based now on this spying. There are, of course, a whole series of procedures because of the Hungarian government's attacks on the rule of law, media freedom, the attacks on democracy. But on this spying, I haven't seen any precise reaction.
And what do you make of that?
I think it's an issue. The first problem, of course, being that the EU institutions, given that we don't have a police or an intelligence force, I'm not sure how well protected the EU institutions actually are against these kind of attacks. I've seen it a bit firsthand because during the European election campaign, all of a sudden I had the cybersecurity of the European Parliament in my office saying that there was an attack with an Israeli spying software called Kandiro on my accounts, and they gave me a list of governments that are clients or that use this spying software, the Hungarian government being one on the list. But in general, the defense mechanisms that the different EU institutions are reasonably limited.
So there was an attempt to hack you as well?
Not successfully, but there was an attack. And as far as the Parliament administration told me, quite sophisticated, because they hacked the Gmail account of a Ukrainian student, which then supposedly wrote to me with this Kandiro attack, referencing also a visit to Ukraine that I had previously taken just before this attack happened. So very sophisticated with very expensive software where, a single device infected costs in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yeah, that's the situation that we find ourselves in, and to which the reply of the EU institutions so far is very limited.
That's striking. And to this, I want to ask you a question that Szabolcs Panyi, the lead investigative journalist behind the uncovering of the story, asked me not that long ago, right before we had this chat. If Hungary got away with spying on EU civil servants, why wouldn't other countries? It really seems that there's no deterrent at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a fear as well. And not only, that there isn't a real deterrence, but how can, for example, anti-corruption investigators of Olaf or in general the staff of the EU institutions, how can they do their job monitoring what's going on and covering corruption in Hungary if they're routinely spied on, if, for example, information of sources could get out like that? I mean, there's a whole host of consequences that, in a way, I would prefer not to even imagine, but that's currently the world we live in.
So, I mean, this should serve as a lesson. So what measures could be put in place to offer more security to the EU civil servants?
Well, first of all, the Commission needs to start a procedure to make sure that, it's illegal. Member states should not be spying or otherwise, breaking the law in their interactions with the EU institutions. Secondly, I think that the EU institutions need to invest more in cybersecurity and defense.
And this is what the commissioner in charge of anti-fraud, Piotr Serafin, had to say about the measures in place. Scarce measures in place, I have to say, when addressing the parliament yesterday.
The Commission's competent services have been also strengthening the resilience of staff at all levels regarding human and digital espionage through information sessions and awareness-raising campaigns. Staff members are regularly reminded that they may be the targets of intelligence-gathering attempts, both in their professional and their private lives.
We need to regularly check the electronic devices, phones, computers, tablets of those that interact with this government to make sure that there are no spying softwares used. And I think a whole host of precautionary measures that need to be taken when EU civil servants travel to the country. I mean, I'm not going to speak openly about it now on the media, but there is a number of things, of course, that can be done that at least make spying more difficult, let's say.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks.
This was Euractiv's podcast, Today in the EU. Sound design by Miriam Sainz de Tejada and Niels de Keokelare. Research and production by Charles Cohen. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news and sign up for our newsletters. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite streaming platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.